the film is about the men's rights movement,
Right.
and it's actually kind of my journey of learning about what their talking points are, because I've been a feminist my entire adult life. What I've found, though, is that pretty much across the board, the MRAs do say feminism made great gains for women, and we don't want to take that away. We want women to have rights and choices, but we want men to have more choices. So my question for you is, MRAs say in the US, because I think everyone can say that worldwide there are still many ways that women are discriminated against and need to catch up. But in the US specifically, how are women still being discriminated against?
Okay, well, I want to answer your question in two parts, because I want to address the kind of easy equation that the men's rights movement makes with that statement that, well, women have made enormous strides. This is great for women, but men still lag behind. I share that. The origins of the men's rights groups come from the 70s, from a time of when men were saying, wow, feminist women are doing these amazing things, challenging what some of the men's rights people would call the female sex role. And that's really bad. And what they're doing is fantastic, because the female sex role completely constrains them and imprisons them. And we have to challenge the male sex role. We have to be, because it divides people, human beings, into two halves. Their male half and their female half. And women said, we're whole people. We're not going to be confined to simply being, kind and sweet and nice and pretty. We're also going to be competent and assertive and ambitious. And men have always been competent and assertive and ambitious, but we needed to claim the parts of us that were kind and gentle and loving and nurturing as well. And so in a way, there was a kind of symmetry between the two. The question that I would always pose to the men's rights groups is, why do you think that women are the cause of that problem? There's no logical correlation. There's no logical reason. Unless you think that feminist women are in charge of the Congress of the United States and occupy the White House and control every single legislature and board of trustees of every university and corporate board of every company in the country, how did feminist women do this? We did it to ourselves. And so the point of, so I still subscribe to some of the earlier ideas of men's liberation that feminist women also did. If you read, for example, Gloria Steinem's work, or if you read Betty Friedan's, the second edition of Betty Friedan's the Feminine Mystique, she says, we have to liberate our brothers from this terrible sex role, right? So how did they get steered to blaming feminist women? There's no reason for that. But I share with them this idea that men have gotten a raw deal too. So now let me answer your question, but you'll have to repeat it.
Yeah. Well, how are women still being discriminated against in the US?
Well, this is pretty easy. I mean, look, you look at every single corporate board, you look at every single board of trustees at every single university, including Wellesley and Vassar. You look at every single legislature, national, local, state. Every geopolitical organization, the IMF, the World Bank, every single one of them is run by men. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, it simply is. But it also is the case that women still earn, about 75 to 80 cents for every man's dollar. It is still the case that women face a kind of gauntlet of sexual harassment in the workplace. It is still the case that women, my students, will tell you all of the different ways that they have to watch themselves and police themselves to reduce their risk of sexual assault on any given evening on every single campus in the country. It's incontestable that women are still the victims of discrimination. Now, that said, it is also true that so we're not there yet, right? It is also true that women and men are more equal in the United States today than we've ever been in our history. And that's also incontestable. We're not there. There's a long way to go, but we are far more equal today than we ever have been.
Great answer. Okay, hold on. All right. Oh gosh, said that, hold that thought, and I lost it.
Oh, I know that. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. All
Wait,
right.
it was something off of what you just said. Oh, because I bring up that point all the time to every MRA, that if you look at any of the positions of power, it's dominated by men.
Right.
And the reaction I get to the MRAs is they say, well, it's because women don't want those positions. A woman could be president. They're 51% of the voting population.
Really?
But women aren't going for those higher positions because it's much, well, they said it in nicer words than I'm going to say it in worse words, but basically they say it's easier to be the wife of the president than to be the president.
That seems true. but so what? I mean, that's not the point. The point is not to be the wife of the president or the president. The point is that you asked me a question about whether or not there's still discrimination against women. Now, there's two ways to answer that. One is, do we still hold archaic, antediluvian attitudes about women and women's proper role and proper place? And secondly, are there structural reasons, structural impediments to women's equality, wage differential, sex segregation in the workplace? And those two come together. We believe, for example, that women can't do some jobs or are not fit to do some jobs physically or something like that. So sometimes they come together. But I think that this idea that, that women don't want to do it is belied by all of the available evidence. I'm more of the field of dreams theorist. If you build it, they will come. If you let them in, they come. And they do. I was an expert witness for the Justice Department some years ago in the VMI and Citadel case. Because there, women wanted to enter these all-male, state-supported military institutions. And the institution said, it's inappropriate for women to do this. Women shouldn't be able to do this. Women don't want to do this. Women don't want to have this kind of training. And there were women who said, I do. So who are we then to say, well, you can't do it, right? That's why the Supreme Court eventually overruled basically ruled in favor of opening VMI and Citadel to women, was because, of course, we don't get to decide that. Women do. There should be equal opportunity. I think I think the idea that the reason that there's, let me go back to something. I'll bet you don't even remember this, okay? 2008. This is about the attitudes part of the inequality. 2008, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were campaigning for the Democratic nomination, at one of Hillary's rallies, there was this guy who stood up with a big sign that said, "Iron my shirt." Do you remember that?
No.
No, you don't remember that. That's right. Most people don't remember that. Most people don't remember that because sexism is so much more permissible than racism. Imagine if at an Obama rally, some white guy got up with a sign that said, "Shine my shoes." Don't you think every candidate, including the Republicans, would have said, wait a minute, stop everything, that's wrong. It would have been on the front page of every newspaper, every single magazine, it would have led every single TV news story. But but with sexism, iron my shirt, go back to your place, that didn't even make a ripple. You didn't even know about it, right? That's why I say part of this discrimination against women that I think exists today is because we still have those ideas. Women don't want it, and even if they did, they're not qualified for it. They couldn't do it physically, they couldn't do it mentally, it's too difficult. And in the guise, I think, of protecting women in their kind of porcelain fragility, I think we actually perpetuate discrimination against women. So it seems to me, I'm just not qualified to make that choice. If you want to go into the army, good for you. If you want to be a brain surgeon, fine with me. Think about all of the different professions in our society that we used to think women can't do, like making movies. Right? Think about all the different professions that we have said, well, women can't do that. Women aren't qualified for it. So my feeling is if women, if we open the opportunity, women will come into it. Will they come in equal numbers to men? Maybe, maybe not. If we finally open up, fields like surgery to women, not as many surgeons are women, but there are some, somewhere around 30%. And that's one of the most male-dominated professions, medical professions. So my feeling is not in equal numbers, but in some numbers, in numbers sufficient to say those barriers were artificial, and if you pretend that they were based on women's natural abilities or women's inclinations, you were mistaken.
I agreed with everything you said. What about the MRAs say that the gender wage gap is a myth?
This is, look, the MRAs say that the gender wage gap is a myth. Economists don't say that. No serious economist says that the gender wage gap is a myth. There's a lot of different ways in which we measure the wage gap. And part of it has to do with the fact it's a connection with sex segregation. So many people work in jobs where they don't have colleagues, co-workers of the same sex, of the opposite sex. So we don't really know because we're sent into different arenas. So comparable worth has been very, very difficult to measure. But on the aggregate, the wage gap has remained relatively constant with some increase and a bigger increase, a really big increase actually, among younger entry-level workers, right? Among workers, for example, who are, say, 25 and entering, or 22 to 27, let's say, entering the workforce, the wage gap is virtually non-existent. This is particularly true for white workers, not for African Americans, but for white workers. But gender still remains the best predictor, more than race, of the gender of the wage gap. It's white men, white women, black women. So that's the first thing. So if you hold it constant, but here's where the wage gap really takes hold. Not when you have your first kid, but when you have your second. You'll take, most women will say that they want to take a little time off when their first kid is born because they want to be there, but they want to go right back to work and they want to keep their career going. But when they have their second kid, then they're going to take some time off because they know their career trajectory is going to be fine. Well, in fact, their career trajectory flattens out then. Because they take that time off, they never get back, and the gap then grows. It is not gender specifically that hurts women in wage gap. It's motherhood. And so if we want to eliminate the gender wage gap, which I don't know that there's political will to do that, we have to support parents. Because that's where it begins to really, men and women will come out and they'll start off the same trajectory. And then women will have their first kid, and it'll be a little bit of a space. But then they flatten and the men's wages go up. And so if you look at the women and men by age 40, there's a big gap. So that's what's really driving the continuation of the gender wage gap.
So it's different.
I'm sorry if this is all sociology and technical, but it's really not gender, it's parenthood. Parenthood actually enhances men's wages. Because, it's like, well, you got a kid now, so you've got to give him a raise. So men's wages, on becoming parents, men's wages go up and women's flatten.
Are they having the same hours worked, though? Or are women taking less hours?
This is, all occupations, all hours sort of rounded out. So, yes, but what does it do if you take time off? The wage gap is an hourly wage gap, right? Or it's a annual salary wage gap. But the annual salary one factors in the number of hours that people work. So it's not like it's simply because women go part-time or women go half-time.
Okay. Interesting. So Warren Farrell, his big talking point is that single women make 117% wage to the single man. And it's when they're married with kids that men have higher earning power and women have less. But when it's single people compared, women make 117% more.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you say that because, what that would fuel is the feminist argument that, single women are happier than married women and married men are much happier than unmarried men. Although the ideology, of course, is exactly the opposite. The ideology is that being unmarried for a man means you're free and you can have sex with as many young women as you want, and you have no constraints, no ball and chain, no gold digger wives, none of that sort of stuff. Married men are much happier than unmarried men. Married women are slightly less happy than unmarried women. So in fact, I mean, on that it goes married men, right, and then unmarried women, and then married women, and then unmarried men are the least happy.
I was thinking maybe single women made more money because of sex appeal, and usually single women are younger, and so maybe if they're a pharmaceutical sales rep, or they're doing something where it's face-to-face sales.
It is true. No, it is true that coming out of high school, or especially coming out of college, women and men will be roughly on par in terms of their occupations. And there are enough men at the same age, remember, so we're talking about, let's just say the average age of marriage now is 27, 28. So let's say during their 20s, there are enough men taking low-wage manufacturing jobs, whereas women are taking more service sector jobs, where their wages will have a slight difference. It's probably not significant, but there may be. But it changes dramatically when A, as they age, and B, as they become parents. And so, as Warren says, as they get married.
Yeah.